Hello, everybody. This is Jim Koenig speaking from RTI Pro Control, and today we have an awesome class on deep dive training for Pro Control. Also joining us here on the moderation side is Mr. John Dawson, who's on our West Coast side of the business. Today's instructor is Mr. Vin Bova. He is the all-knowing man here, director of our dealer experience team. Who's going to kind of walk you through some of the deep dive. One of the key things here as we talk about Pro Control really, is how do you differentiate yourself against other dealers? Pro Control is going to be real simple, out of the box programming. You'll get up and running, but there's a ton of power features that are built into the product. And that's some of the stuff we want to show you today is how to trick out the system, differentiate yourself from the rest of the customers out there that you might be competing against also out there in the world. If you do have questions, don't use the chat window, use the Q&A box pop-up for that one. John and I will be moderating those, although John's far more adept at answering those questions today. We'll keep an eye on those. Format today, we're going to take about an hour here, a good full hour to go through the presentation. If you ask some questions or examples that maybe we didn't cover in class and they're good ones for everybody, if you want to stick around, we'll go over those here at the tail end of the presentation. If you haven't signed up for Pro Control yet, or if you're still if you're looking for more training on the sales features, applications of the product, you can go to procontrol.com and the dealer site. There's some training. We've uploaded a 1-hour presentation, kind of walks you through the product line, covers the training details as well. And there's some individual modules there as well. But yeah, Pro Control, neat stuff. Don't forget, we've got a 3-year warranty. We sell to the channel, to the dealers. We're not available online through retailers. So it's a great product to support. I know with the questions of inventory out there in the world these days, we are well stocked and experiencing, pretty tremendous growth here with Harmony's exit from the marketplace. But just know we can handle another couple 100% growth this year with Pro Control pretty easily. We ordered up deep last year on this product line. So while we're having, record sell through, we've already signed more dealers year to date than we did all of last year. So we're on a great clip this year in terms of new dealer acquisition and a lot of dealers coming back to buy the product because it definitely fits the right price point and gives you the right solution out there. But without further ado, I'm going to kick this over to Vincent to walk you through the presentation today. But like I said, punch your questions into that Q&A window, and John and I will be here to answer those questions as we go through the presentation. But enjoy.
All right, welcome guys. It's great to have everyone here. I'm really excited to be going over these power options with you. I just want to clear up some of the questions we usually get. By no means does power features imply that it's complicated or difficult to learn, and it's a real comparable to the wizard-based options you get out there. Like Jim said, you're going to be able to deploy systems really quickly. You're just going to crank them out and make money pretty easily. But with the power features under the hood, you're going to be able to solve problems, add that pizzazz to your interfaces, and make your client think you spent hours when you really just spent minutes designing his project. So let's get going. So we're looking at a system file here that resembles the introductory course, course 1. And what I did, I've added a couple of devices just to illustrate some of the features. So we really didn't go over any of the real configuration options of the processor, remotes, and different control devices. So let's do that now. I'm going to start by clicking on the ProLink processor. Now, anytime you click on anything, anywhere in Pro Control, whether it's a Pro Control device or a control device, you're going to see the options or the available settings for that specific device here on the right side. So as I'm clicked on the ProLink processor, you're going to see the ProLink processor's configuration options. Can you guys see you guys are good, right? You can see my screen. All right, so let's take a look at system zone code. Now, system zone code is going to be set to a unique number between 0 and 255, and that's going to allow your Pro Control system to operate without any collusion with systems that surround you. So if you're in a high concentration area, maybe you're in a multi-rise building or a high-rise building, I should say, or in a multi-unit development, there could be other control systems encroaching on your signal. So by changing that system zone code, you'll eliminate any chance that somebody will be able to interfere with your Pro Control signal, which is on the 433 megahertz band. So make sure you do that. The channel, which is a unique number from 0 to 13, is a number that you're going to assign to every ProLink processor. Now, there's a chance that you could have more than one ProLink processor in a home. Maybe you have one dedicated to the theater room. Maybe you have one dedicated upstairs in the family room or the bedroom. So make sure that each ProLink has a different channel. That will allow you to operate your Pro Control freely without any collusion from your other processors in that area or that home. It's a little different than the system zone code, and you should set that to a unique number, again, 0 to 13. Now, Pro Control has the ability to live on the network. Obviously, it's going to allow you to sync the ProLink R over the network. You're going to be able to control iOS devices over the network. So it's important that that ProLink R is connected to the network. You can use DHCP or DHCP reservations, or you can use a static IP. If you use a static IP, just set the use DHCP to configure option. And I'll just open this up a little more. Just set this to no, and you'll be able to plug in some your static information, the IP address, net mask gateway, and so on. So I'm going to leave this set to yes right now and continue on. Now, here's where you label the IR ports. So your ports 1 through 4 can be labeled, and it's very important you do that so it's easy to assign your devices when you get there. So you're cosmetically labeling these ports. So maybe port 1 is your smart TV, maybe port 2 is your Yamaha AVR, maybe port 3 is your Direct TV. And port 4 can be a dual device. Maybe it could be your Blu-ray / Roku if you use a dual emitter. That's completely acceptable. Synchronized pages is going to be used when you're using the iPro 8 with iOS devices. By selecting yes to synchronize pages, it'll make sure that it keeps those devices in sync so that when you flip to a page on your iPro 8 or iPad, the other remote will do the same thing. I just want to make sure everyone can mute their speakers because we're having some noise coming in. So if everybody can mute their speakers, that'd be great. We also have the ability to use remote access. So if your client wants to use his iPhone mostly or his iPad remotely outside the system, it's completely acceptable. The only thing you need to do here is to enter in an IP or a DNS account. Obviously, if your IP address doesn't change and your cable box provider has provided you with a specialized IP, you can enter the IP, or you'll set up a DNS account for your customer. So I'll just put in a fake account like dns.smith.com. Now, port 4110 is the default port of the ProLink R processor. You're going to port forward 4110 to whatever IP address the ProLink R has on the network. So you can see it's really important to either reserve that DHCP address or to set a static address so that that IP address doesn't change. So once you forward that port, you'll be able to use the remote access feature outside the home. You'll also set location, like your area, if your city, or your latitude or longitude, if your city doesn't appear in this comprehensive list. That will give you a very specific, the Pro Control processor has a very specific idea of where you are. Same thing with the clock. You're going to set the time zone. You're going to make sure you're set to the right time, and you're going to enable the NTP server to adjust the time, similar to a computer. So those are the ProLink R processors, really properties, really simple to configure. It'll take you just a minute to do that with every project, and you'll be happy because it'll make your life easier for the next steps. Now, when we move to the Pro 24R processor, Pro 24R remote, excuse me, you're just going to see some basic settings here, whether you want to enable your tilt switch. And, one thing about Pro Control is that a lot of the settings just require a yes or no. So in this case, if you want to enable the tilt switch, you'll select yes. This tilt switch will allow you to control your remote when it's picked up. it'll light up. You can set your beeper to on-screen buttons only, or if you want to use the keypad and on-screen buttons, that's great for the client who wants that audible feedback when he's pressed the button to make sure he pressed it correctly. You can set your tone to low or high, so that beeping sound can be either low or high. And your backlight timeout is the time in which your remote will kind of go to sleep if it doesn't feel a movement or isn't being used. I usually like to jack this up to about 40 seconds. That comes in real handy when the client demo starts and the remote doesn't fall asleep while you're trying to explain to the client how to do something. And then, of course, your backlight level can be low, medium, and high. So you'll adjust according to what kind of area your Pro Control remote is in. So those are some cool settings there. The iPad doesn't have any settings per se, but if you do use more than one iOS device, such as an iPad or an iPhone in a project, you'll need to use a Pro Panel license or purchase a Pro Panel license. Remember, we give you one Pro Panel license free with every ProLink R processor. So you'll be able to deploy an iPhone or an iPad free of charge. But if you have any more, you're going to need a license. In that case, select Pro Panel license from this toolbar. Once you launch that, and I've already gone ahead and added a license, but I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to click Add, and you can either purchase a single license online, a 5-pack online, or you could enter a license code once you purchased and obtained that code. So let's see how this works. Let's say I want to purchase a 5-pack, and it's late on a Saturday night. That's what the convenient part of being able to do this online is. Click OK. It'll launch this little website area where you can enter in your payment information. Once you enter in all this information, including the MAC address of the ProLink R processor, which is it's designated to every project, it'll email you that special encryption code. Once you have that encryption code, you're going to click Enter License Code here. Enter it in. I've already entered in that license code, and boom, my license was attached to my ProLink system, to the Pro Control project, tied to the MAC address of that ProLink R. So great, easy process, convenient, and you can do it any time of the day or night. All right, so that's how to set those settings. So now we've understand the processor properties. We've attached a Pro Panel license to the project. We learned how to do remote access with iOS devices. Now it's time to go into navigational features in Pro Control. And I'm going to start with the Pro 24R remote. That's that touchscreen remote. Great value, combination of hard buttons. Clients are going to love this. I'm going to double click on this, and it's going to take me to the interface. I'm going to make it a little larger for everyone to see. Now, in navigating around Pro Control, you have a couple of options. A lot of people like to use gesture control when they get to go to the next page, and it's no different with the Pro 24R. We gave you the ability to create special pages called screens. Sometimes we refer to them as frames as well, which allow the client to advance to the next page simply by swiping the screen. Now, the way you create a frame is to advance this arrow here where it says screen 1 of 1. I can advance this arrow now and create another frame on the remote control. So I'll go to my images here, and I'll add some source buttons here for my Pro 24R remote control. I'll just look for a source button here and bring it in. So you'll go here and you'll create your page of buttons here. Maybe there's special commands that are settings for the home or something like that. Now you'll see it says screen 2 of 2. So how do you think the client can get to that second page? He could either gesture control the screen, or you could give him a button to do it. In page 2, if we look at this macro command, let's delete it so we can show you how to do it from the beginning. Click Add. Click the page you want to jump to. In this case, it's the home page. So bring that in. Select that page link, and on the bottom, select what screen you want to jump to. Screen 1 is this first page, but I want to jump to screen 2. Okay, so that's how to jump. You can either use gesture control or the client can press this button. Some clients like gesture control. Some won't like it, but some will. So use it sparingly. Now, so those are frames. Now, pages are a different story. Even though this is screen one, this is one page, it has screen one of two, meaning there's two screens on this page. Another way you could do this is, or navigational way you can do this, is by adding a page, a separate page that isn't, you're not able to get to with gesture control. Maybe I want to add a blank page. Maybe I want to add a page from my template here. And we give you a little preview when you go down here. Let's say I want to add like this. Let's look for a generic page. Here's one. This generic page, maybe I want to add that as my second page of my home page instead of that gesture controlled screen. And here I can put my buttons on it just the same as I did with the other one. However, this is a completely different page. So the only way I can go and give my client a jump to this page is, if you wanted to do page 2, let me delete this screen here, is to add a page link to that page. And you'll see my generic page show up here. Of course, you could rename that generic page to home page 2 or whatever you want, but it's easy to do that. And you get an overhead view of all your pages simply by clicking this pages button in the toolbar. If I stretch this out, you'll be able to see a helicopter view of all your pages and screens. See how this is screen 2 of 2, screen 1 of 2, and you could go down the list here, and here's the other page we created, that generic page. I can move this up in the list here if I want to, or I could delete it, or I could flip the screens. Check out, if I want their favorites to be the first screen on that page, I can right click here and I can move that to the left. Now this becomes the first page and this becomes the second page. I'll just move it back to be sure. So we know now the difference between pages and screens, or frames as we call them. Now, in order to understand frames using an iPad, let's go to our iPad device and take a look at this. Since you're unable to create other screens in your iPad device, see how this advanced button is grayed out? And as I click on it, nothing will happen. So you don't have the ability to create gesture controlled frames or screens on an iPad. However, we gave you the ability to do that using a feature called viewports. With viewports, you can create as many viewport panels as you want within a page and allow the client to advance by simply using gesture control. We've set up the home page as a viewport, and let's take a look at this viewport. I'm going to edit it by right-clicking it. Here you'll see panel 1 of 1. That's different terminology. The other one said screen 1 of 1. Panels are different. That's part of a viewport. All I have to do to create another panel here is advance this button. And now this is the second page of my viewport. We give you these handy little frame holders so you can drag and drop icons or align them to these buttons if you want. Or you could delete them. The client doesn't see them either way. So I'm going to go to my images here, and I'm going to drag and drop an iPad source image here. So let's just, well, actually, I'll pretend it's another home page. So I'll use that. So these are more homepage icons. And of course, I could add a bunch of these as I will. Now you'll notice the panel says 2 of 2. If I advance this now and I don't create anything on the third panel, as I go back, it'll just say 2 of 2. You actually have to add an element to that panel in order for it to count. But now the client, really, you, the programmer, sees this, but the client won't see the viewport. He'll just see a page that he could swipe and get to the next screen, or panel, as we call it, with viewports. We're going to show you more on viewports a little bit later, and we're going to show you a preview using an actual iPad after we create it. All right, let's go and jump now to our macro steps now. And those were the navigational ways you navigate around the screen. I'm going to go to I'm going to go to my DirecTV page, and I'm just going to borrow this button. I'm going to delete the command on it just to illustrate some of the powerful macro tools you have with Pro Control. Now, we know that Pro Control is going to program all your buttons for you. It's going to program your activity macros on the home page. So there's really not much you need to do. However, if you want to go and add some special commands or solve some problems or beef up your interfaces by allowing the client to do certain things, use the macro steps. I'm going to access the macro steps by clicking Add. And once you're in the macro window, that will be available for you. Here are all the different macro steps, and I'm going to explain each one. First, I'll start with delay. Now, delay is an important feature in Pro Control because sometimes delays are needed. For example, let's drag and drop a delay in, and let's drag and drop a power on command from our, let's say, our smart TV. So I'm going to drag in a power on, and then I'm going to drag in an input change. Sometimes you need to put a delay between a power on and an input change because your TV takes a certain amount of time to warm up. Now, 3/10 of a second might not be enough, so you can go down here and change it. How long do you want the delay to be in seconds? Let's say 3 seconds, 3.0 seconds. So you can change this delay to whatever you want, and you'll set delays. Sometimes equipment need a little bit of a breather in between commands. All of your IR commands will have 0.3 of a second delay by default without you having to create any macros. And you can see that you could defeat that value for every IR code down here where it says delay for 0.3 seconds. You could say, no, don't do that. Sometimes with certain channel favorites, you might want to do that if that delay doesn't really work well. So that's delay. So let's delete this stuff and go on to the next step. Stop. Now, stop is going to be useful in certain macros, especially long macros where you've created a long macro and now you're trying to troubleshoot it. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe something's not working right. Maybe something is not jiving well. So you can easily go and create that stop command at some point in the macro so that you can troubleshoot it without having to run through the whole thing. You can also use this for other reasons, but that's the most basic one. Now, button pause. This is one of those nifty features you may never use, or you might rely on it heavily to solve a problem. Let's pretend our Blu-ray player, hold on one second, I apologize for the ringing. Let's say our Blu-ray player is the forward command on our Blu-ray player. Let's actually do this on the forward button of our Blu-ray. Here it is. So let's say that this forward button works in a way where you want to that you have to press play to stop forwarding it. So in other words, you press forward, it keeps forwarding, and the only way to get it out of that forward process is to hit play. Sometimes that could be annoying, especially when you have a touch screen or a remote control. You have to look down. You got to find that play button. You might not find your right. You might not do it right in the step. So what you could do is use this button pause feature. Let's show you how it works. If you put this command before the button pause, it will continuously send that forward command until you release the button. Then at that point, and I'll just find my DirecTV play command. At that point, it will continue on with the rest of the macro. So you hit forward, it keeps forwarding until you hit the play button, where now it'll start playing at the right point. A lot easier to use. You just hit the forward button, let go, and hit play button. So useful feature. TiVo has a feature where you can advance using this, and it works really well when you're skipping through commercials. All right. Another thing you can use is the repeat steps command. Now, the repeat steps command is very similar to the button pause, except this will continuously ramp a command. So let's say your cursor up is not working properly. Maybe it's just not really, instead of wanting to do cursor up, cursor up, cursor up, cursor up, your hand gets tired. So you can just keep your finger down on cursor up, and it will continuously send the command. And then when you let go, it'll stop sending it. So that's a repeat steps command. Sometimes you can also use this with volume if your volume's not ramping properly, or with our Z series, you could use this with a serial device. Okay, another command you can use is a comment. Comments come in real handy, especially when people send me a file and I want to make little comments like, this is where the Blu-ray pauses or something like that. So you can put little comments in your programming. Probably not good for like one single little step macros like this, but you kind of get the idea of where this would be useful. All right, another feature we could use here is toggle IR code. Now, in order to illustrate how this feature works, I'm going to add one of those stubborn devices that has something called toggle codes. So I'm just going to go add, and I'm going to add this infrared device. It's a Cisco box, well, that's one of them, and I think it's the IPTV model. So I'm going to add this Cisco IPTV box. I'm not gonna create an interface. I'm just gonna call this cable toggle and click OK. Now go back to my DirecTV button here. Now let's take a look at the commands in the library for that cable manufacturer. If you come across anything like this, this implies that the cable company, through its evilness, created a command, two IR commands for each button. That is, they reserve the right to create two IR commands. So what that allows the cable company to do is put two commands on a single button. Whereas you press the button once, you get one command, you press it again, and you get another command. Now, sometimes they don't take advantage of that, or at least right away, but they keep the same IR code sets. So if you have a feature like this, you're going to have to deal with it. Otherwise, if you just put back in, the next time you press it, it's not going to work correctly. So let's show you how to use this feature. Let's go with the, let's see, menu would be a good example. I'm going to drag the menu in the brackets, and then I'm going to drag menu main t=1. The way this works is these are actually two separate commands, but they do the same thing. So when the client presses this button, it'll run the first, and then he presses it again, it will run the second, as it needs to. These are stubborn devices. You're going to see these with Windows Media Center remotes or common. Some cable boxes out there in the US, not many, but some. And some other little funky devices you'll see from time to time. I just came across a planar wall IR code that has the same type of toggle. Now, conventionally speaking, you could use this as a tool for the client. For example, maybe instead of clogging up the touchscreen with different buttons for the client, you can give him a command here, like let's say input HDMI 1 and input HDMI 2. So now you give him one button called HDMI, and then he presses it once, HDMI 1, presses it again, HDMI 2, presses it again, HDMI 1, and so on. So you can toggle between two IR codes if you like. Sometimes that comes in handy. Maybe the client has two favorite DSP modes, like maybe 7-channel stereo and cinema or something like that. So you can toggle those as well. But mainly, this is a good tool you have if you run across those toggle code devices. Okay. Power sensing. So let's save that for a little bit later, as I want to give you a dedicated lesson to that. Start control processor commands. Let's show you how this works in action. I'm going to go to my home page here to show you how this works, and I'm going to click my DirecTV button. And you can see that we programmed this for you, this feature, start control processor commands, automatically on this button. Let's talk about why we use this and what it's good for. When you press a button on a Pro Control R remote, certain commands can run from the remote, like the page jumps and stuff like that, and some can run from the processor. Those are the commands that have emitters and use trigger codes, right? So if you didn't have this start control processor command in this item here, and I'll actually delete it, what it will do, It'll change the page to please wait. It'll delay 4 seconds. Then it will change to the DirecTV page. And then it will start running these macros here. However, by putting that start control processor commands right away, this will immediately tell the remote to start processing these power commands as you're running the remote commands, since the remote has multiple macro engines. So basically what will happen is it comes across the start control processor commands. It starts powering on it's setting up the DirecTV option. And it will also, at the same time, change to the please wait page, delay for 4 seconds, and then jump to the DirecTV page just in time when this finishes, since there's a delay here also. So you'll have to put that in macros if you don't want it to be held up by running remote commands. And the reason why we do remote commands is because some remote commands can't run on a processor. For example, I can't drag that page jump to the processor since the processor is a one-way processor. So with page jumps, they have to run on the remote control, but we don't want to hold the processor commands up. All right, let's skip flag. Oh, let's talk about devices. I'm sorry. Devices is straightforward. We've been using this a lot. These are just accessing all the different IR codes for all the devices you've added. Simply open them up, and they're listed in alphabetical order. They're very consistent, meaning digit 0 on a DirecTV will be the same as digit 0 on a Blu-ray and a TV as well. So always count on that consistency, and it'll get you real quick into learning things. Flag operations, we're going to save for after the power sensing. And page links, we already got the hang of that as well. Open up this, and by putting these in the macro, you can jump to any page you want. You want to jump to the generic page in here instead of the DirecTV, just put it in there and delete the other page jump. Now, you could also adjust the bottom where it says screen number. If that page does have multiple screens, you could jump to any screen number or frame that you like, instead of having the client jump to the screen one and then having the gesture control throughout the pages. Okay? All right, let's talk about power sensing. Now, Pro Control gives you 2 sense port on the Pro Control processor. The sense port is just an RJ45 port with a really easy to understand connector pinout that's available in the ProLink R processor manual, and there's a separate tech note on it. Now, why would you use a sense input? There's a lot of reasons why they come in handy, but basically their job is to do 2 things: sense a high signal and sense a low signal, and tell the processor which one is present. A high signal is a voltage anywhere between 3 volts to 24 volts. A low signal is when the processor senses no voltage or ground. Okay, so that's the job of this sense put. Now, what do you connect these to? Obviously, one end connects to the ProLink R in an RJ45 cable that's wired to the pinout, and there's only a couple of pins that are needed. Now, what do you wire to the other end? There's lots of things. You could run it to a USB port, and then you could connect that USB port to a TV or cable box that and understand when it's on or off, because it shuts off the USB when it shuts off the TV or cable box. You could use it as a dry contact for amps, TV lifts, garage doors to sense whether they're open or closed, on or off, up or down. You could use it as a 12-volt trigger sensor to determine if a projector or a receiver is on. And now you can determine how to handle devices that are stubborn. Okay, let's take a look at a stubborn device. I've created a projector and a cable box here on our ProLink Pro 24R that will be used to just run a projector with a cable box. Now, this macro is pretty straightforward. It's powering on the projector, powering on the receiver, power toggle? It's power toggling the cable box. Well, that's not a good thing because since that cable box doesn't have a power on or a power off, we don't definitively know the condition of that cable box as we send that power toggle. Since this is a watch cable button, we expect that power toggle to turn it on. But what if it already is on? How can we deal with that? How do we know whether or not we should send this power toggle to turn it on or whether to ignore it if the cable box is already on? What we could do is if that cable box has a USB port in the back, and if the manufacturer of that cable box turns the box or turns the USB port off when the cable box turns off, we could use the sense input. We can splice the RJ45 to the sense RJ45 to the USB cable, and then we can plug it into the cable box. Now it'll sense a high voltage if that cable box is on, meaning there's constant flow of voltage, or off if the cable box is off. So how does this work? Let's go to the sense commands here, the power sense it's called. Drag in one of these commands. All it is an if-else statement. So what do we want to do here? It's by default, it'll say if port 1 is off. We could change those options on the bottom here. Just select it, and we could say if port 2 is on. We could change these around. So let's leave it as if port 2 is on. So if port 2 is on, that means it sends voltage from the cable box. And since this is a watch cable command, what should it do if it senses voltage already? Should it send that power toggle here? Should we put that here? Turn up power toggle it? No, because that will turn it off. So we need to use an else statement. So if port 2 is on, do nothing. And maybe I'll stick a little delay here just to I'll make a little bit of a shorter delay here. We'll do 1/10 of a second. That's a split second. So if port 2 is on, meaning the sense input of the cable box is sensing current, what should we do? We're going to pause for 1/10 of a second, and then we're going to continue on with the rest of the commands. Else, the port does not sense power. It's going to power toggle the cable box and then continue on. And then the next time the client runs this, the port will be on, so it'll do nothing and then jump out. So that's a definitive way of determining if that power toggle or that cable box is on or off, and knowing when to send that power toggle command so that it doesn't mess up the cable box. Now, a lot of TVs do this. They'll shut them off. So if the TV you come across is old and it has a USB port, you can probably use that as a sense. Not all cable boxes shut off their USB. But if you get lucky enough, it will, and you'll be able to use this. But sometimes you won't have that capability. Now, before we jump off of power sensing, it's important to know that you can also sense other things. You can sense whether a projector is on or off by that projector, by sense input on the voltage. You run it out to the voltage output. So like on a projector, in this case, and let's delete this command here now, you can see here that the projector takes 32 seconds to warm up. Now that's a drag, because what if you press the button again and the projector is already on? Do you have to really sit there for 32 seconds while the processor runs these commands or holds you up? So what you could do is use a sense command. You could say, if the power sense, and again, we'll use port 1 in this case, and we'll use the opposite, off. If the port 1 is off, that means it's not sensing any voltage from the projector. So what should it do if it's not selecting any voltage? Well, then it should turn it on and delay 32 seconds. Else, it's not off, it's on, do nothing. Okay, so that's how you use power sensing. Now, unfortunately, you're going to come across devices, and let me put that power toggle back in that I accidentally deleted, you're going to come across power toggles and you're not going to be able to use power sensing. That's going to be a drag with wizard-based software. You're going to hit a wall. But with Pro Control, you don't hit a wall. You have some options. They might not be 100% options, but they're close enough. We could use something called flags. Now, you're going to see under flag operations some different things you can do with flags. You could clear a flag. You could set a flag. You could toggle a flag from clear to set and set to clear. Or you could test a flag's condition. Now, unlike the power sensing, that's not going to rely on human intervention, the programmer. There's no doubt that sense input is telling me the right information. However, with flags, the programmer is the one who sets and clears flags and tries to keep track of how many times a power toggle has been sent, so you know the condition of a device. So let's do this. Let's first take a look at the flags we have available to us. I'm going to click flags in this macro window here. And you're going to see that we have 255 flags, 6 flags, on the Pro 24R available to it, and 256 flags available to the ProLink R. Why would you set a flag on one versus the other? Well, if you set a flag on a Pro 24R, in this system file, the iPad or any other remote in the system file isn't going to know the condition of that flag state. But if you set it on the processor, it talks to everybody, so everyone knows if that flag is set or cleared. And the idea of setting and clearing this is to time the cable box and understand whether it's on or off, and setting the flag if it's on and clearing the flag if it's off. Let's take a look at how this works. First, we're going to name our flag because we want to keep track of which flags are what, do what. So let's call this cable power. That's what we're trying to keep track of. I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to drag in a test flag option. And this is basically going to test the cable power flag to see if it's set. Who sets it? The programmer sets it. When does he set it? The very first time it power toggles it and it turns on. So if a flag is set, that means the condition is on, meaning the cable box is on. And of course, we could change that down here. We could change the flag names and stuff like that down here. So what do we want to do if the flag is set, meaning the cable box is on? Do we want to power toggle it? No, because if it's set, that means it's on. Well, if we power toggle it, it's going to turn it off. That's not good on a watch cable button. So else power toggle the cable box and now set the flag. So the very first time the client runs this, it's going to come across the time when it needs to decide whether to send that power toggle. Your very first time he runs this, the system is off. So if the flag is set, well, nobody set it to this point, so it's going to do nothing and jump. If it's set already, it's going to do nothing since the cable box is on. But the very first time the client runs this, it's not going to be on, and no one's going to have set the flag. So it's going to do the else side. It's going to power toggle, turning on the cable box, and then it's going to set a flag called cable power, telling the processor that the cable power flag is set, meaning the cable box must be on. We don't know for sure if the cable box is on. The programming is basically keeping track of whether the cable box is on. For those of you who use wizard-based options, this is exactly what runs internally, except you don't have any control over it. So if this works right and it turns on the cable box, and let's say we dabble around the cable box, we come home and we press the Blu-ray, and then we go back to the cable box. Now the cable box is on now. When it gets to the time when it's got to decide whether to send the power toggle, we've set the flag already. No one cleared it, so it must be on. So it's going to do nothing, or it'll send that 1/10 of a second delay. and then skip out of the macro and finish. All right. Now, if you do this on the watch cable button, what about when how are you going to clear the flag? Well, you do that when you shut the cable box off. Let's look at our power off command here. This is where all the equipment turns off. There's our cable box power toggle. But what if we run this without ever using the cable box? It's going to turn itself on when it really should be turning off. So we're going to test that flag condition here. And we're going to say, if that cable box flag, if that programmer set that flag, what should I do? That means the cable box is on. So power toggle, turn that thing off, and now clear the flag. So you're telling the ProLink R processor that that flag is off, meaning the cable box is now off. So if no one ever set that flag, it's not going to do anything. But if someone set it at one point, someone pressed that watch cable button and turned on that cable box, that flag is going to be set until you run this command. And if it's set, it'll power toggle it off and clear the flag so that the next time somebody hits this watch cable button, it'll turn the box, it'll turn the box on. Okay? So you could also use flags for other things. You could use them for avoiding delays, like we did with the projector before. All you have to do is set a flag and then test for it and then decide whether or not you want to send the delay or not. And you could use them for lots of other things as well. Okay. So that's flags, and you have to practice. It takes a little bit of time to understand, but it's very simple to use and very powerful. You can do things like make buttons do one thing or another. If the flag is set, well, the system must be on, and I'll do this. Otherwise, the flag wasn't set, so the system must be off, so I'll do this. Or you can create a his or her interface. Set a flag for his and clear the flag for hers. And then on hers, set the flag for hers and clear the flag for his. And then create a button called a home button that will jump to his or hers based on who the user is. Stuff like that you can do. All right, let's talk about IR codes and how you can learn in IR codes. And that's a pretty powerful feature since a lot of people that use wizard-based software complain that there's codes that aren't in the database that they need. Maybe it's a dinosaur device from a long time ago. In this case, we're going to pretend that the client purchased one of those, those LED strip lights on Amazon. Those, they're very cheap and inexpensive. The problem is he couldn't find the codes in the remote control software. So let's take a look. I'm going to go to devices and I'm going to go look for my infrared device library. And I'm going to look for my XYZ manufacturer for the for my LED strip lights. I don't find any codes. Well, what am I going to do? I need the codes on the remote so the client can control the colors on his television. So what do? Well, with ProControl, we give you a user IR code database. And let's take a look at how this works. If you click on libraries on the control devices, you're going to see an infrared library manager. And if I fire this up, it's going to actually open a separate piece of software that's included with the ProControl system. Now, you're not going to see as many codes as I do. In fact, you might not see any because I've accumulated a lot of codes over time. I've imported RTI control libraries into my ProControl library, which is possible. I've also had big libraries that were provided from manufacturers, and I've imported them in here. So you might see a manufacturer, for example, like, I'm just making this up, but you might see maybe a projector company have a .cml file of IR codes that you could use to import. They usually have an extension .cml. But I'm not interested in importing anything into this right now. I'm interested in just bringing in a remote control. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to take my remote control and I'm going to plug it into the USB port of my laptop and watch as I do that now. I'm not sure if you heard that beep. It might be not able to hear in Zoom, but it actually beeped. Okay. So what I'm going to do now that I'm plugged in with that remote is I'm going to take the factory remote. Okay. And I'm going to make sure that those batteries are fully charged. And I'm going to put down all the information for that remote. So let's go click remote, new, because I'm adding a new remote to my personal library here. Remember, I'm not affecting the Pro Control built-in database. You can't affect that. That's a licensed database that's constantly being updated by RTI as the market changes. But I can affect my user.cml file, which is in the Pro Control directory on your documents area. So what's the manufacturer for my lights? Oh, they're XYZ. What type of device are they? They're LED strips, strip lights for my TV. What's the model? Well, I'm going to say XYZ ABC and click OK. All right. Now that we have a model and we have the remote set up, see, it's ready to roll here. Let's add the functions of the remote right here. So I'm going to add the remote functions, whatever's on the remote. Blue. I'll make them capital. Blue, green, red, white. I'll do yellow too. Why not? Okay. All right. Now at this point, I'm ready to capture my remote control. So I'm going to click capture. But before I start learning in codes, I need to align my remote control. I need the Pro Control IR Library Manager to kind of sniff out the frequency of my remote control. That way, when it's learning in codes, it can do some error checking to make sure they're not wacky. So I'm going to click align. Now, holding the remote that I'm learning in just a few inches away from my Pro Control remote IR window, I'm going to press and hold any button just for a certain amount of seconds. As soon as you see that frequency locked in, 38.0, we're now ready to learn our codes. So now we've learned our frequency. Now let's learn the codes. And this will give you a little directional. Now press and hold the blue key. So it's on blue. So I'm going to press and hold the blue key. Just press and hold a couple of seconds and let go. It'll learn that in. Now press the green key. It'll learn the green in. And the red. Okay, you get the idea. You'll learn them all in. Now, when you finish, you're just going to click out where it says enable capture so that it'll stop doing this. Now, another way, now once you've done that, you can actually look at your codes. If you're a geek like some of the guys we have here, like Cyril Vergely, you can actually look at the waveform of the code for some of you guys who know this stuff, or you could actually look at the hex code that was created. Now, this might not be useful to you, but something that might be useful to you is that if you come across hex codes for this remote somewhere, maybe on Remote Central, maybe there's some documentation on the website for this model, you could, I'm just going to borrow that code. You could enter that in. So instead of learning in the white function, I'm just going to copy and paste the Pronto code in there, and it will put that in for you. Same thing for yellow. I'm just going to copy and paste the code there and apply. Okay? Now, once you're done, you've impacted your user CML. You don't have to save it or anything. You've already done the update. X out of there. And now when you add control devices, infrared devices, instead of using the Pro Control IR codes, you're going to use the user IR codes. And that will access that user CML program. And I'm going to look for XYZ. So make sure you find the right device here. There's actually some people that might have put in a model for XYZ, but here's my XYZ device, my LED strips. I'm going to pop them in. I'll create just a generic page for them. Click OK. And now when I go to my Pro Control here for my generic page and my LED strip lights, or my LED TV strip, I should say. Now, when I go to my macros and I click my devices, there's my strip light commands that I can bring in to the macros if I program any. So the buttons, I should say. All right, Last thing, and then we'll tie it up, viewports. Let's take a look at the viewports that we promised to go over. I'm going to go to my iPad for this one since I've been picking on my Pro 24 way too much in this course. Let's go to our DirecTV. First of all, it's important to know that we create viewports for you automatically in a lot of situations. What would be the reason we created viewports here on the DirecTV? As I edit my viewport, I could see there's two panels in my viewports, and it'll automatically create these little dots on the viewport. It'll tell the client how much gesture or how much swiping he has to do. In this case, he only has to swipe once to get to the second panel. So what we did was we created two panels here, one with navigational commands, one with the regular menu commands. Why did we do that? So that the client can simply swipe this area of the screen without selecting other areas, without changing other areas, excuse me. So convenient. You're taking advantage of that real estate, putting everything on one page that he'll need. Same thing with the bottom, but I'm going to create my own. So I'm going to delete this viewport and all the information in it goes away. Now I'm going to create my own viewport in this case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click one of these shapes. You could draw a rectangle, a rounded rectangle, or a circle, or ellipse, or you can do a viewport. So if you draw a viewport, simply put the mouse where you want, drag across while you're holding down the button, and just make it the same size. Now, if you want to if you want to alter it in any way, all you have to do is click on this little selection mode button and then make adjustments how you will. Maybe you want to shorten it up a little bit. Maybe you want to make it a little longer. Maybe you want to make the sides right and stuff like that. Now to edit a viewport, you right click and edit viewport. Now it almost like ignores the rest of the screen. I'm in my viewport world now. So let's go to my iPad images here and let's look for that iPad buttons here. I call them iPad Center. These are going to be where I have my channel icon. So I'm just going to drag in some buttons here. Now, I know when you drag them in, they're not going to look pretty. They might not be spaced. They might be spaced apart. You could use the alignment features in the viewport. I'm going to align these to the top of the last button. I'm going to distribute these across the screen, equalize them, and center them. Notice when I click center horizontally and vertically, it does it in the viewport, not the rest of the screen. Okay, and now I'm just going to copy these, advance the panel to panel 2 of 2, and paste. And I'll advance to another panel and paste. I can do as many of these I want, as memory allows, of course, but you'll be able to get away with lots of these. 5 is plenty. Now, at this point, I'm going to go back to panel 1. I'm going to go to my TV channels, and I'm just going to drag and drop my TV channels in here. I'm not going to be particular. I'm just going to drag anything I have in here. Oops. Okay, and I'm just going to advance my panel to the next panel, and you can see these little dots now advance with me. That's going to be helpful for the client when he so he knows how much to swipe. Otherwise, he'll be like, when is this viewport going to end? And you don't want to make these too big, just a little word of advice. Otherwise, they become cumbersome to use, but they're really a great way of maximizing your real estate. Let's just do one more. I'm not going to take advantage of every single viewport here. Every single panel on the viewport, I should say. There's still one more, but we'll leave that empty. Okay, then of course you'll program these with the functions. You'll go to the macros, you'll go add, you'll click the DirecTV under devices, and you'll plug in your channels for each one. Real quick and easy, complete control over this. Okay, now once you're done, you're going to click outside of that viewport and it'll go away. Now you have your viewport, which is part of your screen. Let's take a look at how this works. Let's download this to my ProLink processor. As I click ProLink, you'll see it here in the settings. I'm going to click the ProLink processor and I'm going to download to it. Should only take a couple of seconds. Well, that was very quick. All right, so it's just gonna, there it goes. That was real quick. And I'm gonna close out. Now let's take a look at what this looks like. I'm gonna stop the share and I'm gonna share my iPhone with you, or my iPad, I should say, and show you what this actually looks like in real time. Just bear with me. I'm just gonna find this network. Now I'm gonna go to my Pro Control, call it up here. I'm gonna click Get Started. It's gonna find my ProLink processor, my iPad, and it's going to sync it up. All right, here's my iPad now. I'm going to click my DirecTV. There's my viewport. As I could swipe it left to right, there's my blank ones. Watch the buttons underneath move as well. The indicator, the frame and panel indicator lights, so the client knows how many panels he has left. Of course, the rest of the remote, I also have other viewports available. I think there's one on my TV which can go between the menu and setting commands, and that's pretty much it. So we're going to hold it open for any questions. Thank you guys so much for attending. I'm going to stop my share and go back to my software screen in case there's anything you guys want to see or any other questions. We have simply typed them in the question window. And if you've asked a question already, we appreciate your question. Probably some good ones there. And happy to answer anything else.